The discovery, an unnatural death. Found lying lifeless on the cold ground, her body positioned next to an electrical outlet with the prong of a plug resting loosely in her hand, Mrs. Linda appeared, at first glance, to be the victim of a tragic household accident. Onlookers immediately assumed she had been electrocuted. However, law enforcement investigators would soon uncover a series of suspicious clues that pointed to a much darker reality. A solitary woman dies under mysterious circumstances at home. According to the official case files, on the afternoon of the first day of the Lunar New Year in 2017, January 28, 2017, a day traditionally reserved for celebration and new beginnings, residents of Hanlap Village in Tai Bin Province were struck by shock and horror. Mrs. Linda, born 1952, a woman known for living a quiet, solitary life, was discovered dead inside her own home. At the moment of discovery, the victim was found on the floor adjacent to an electrical socket, clutching a plug. The initial consensus among the villagers was that Mrs. Linda had suffered a fatal electric shock. However, the victim's sharp-eyed relatives noticed several anomalies on the body and the surroundings that did not add up. Suspecting foul play, they immediately alerted local authorities. Upon receiving the distress call, the district police coordinated with specialized forensic units from the provincial police department to descend on the scene and initiate a full-scale investigation to uncover the truth. Investigators from the provincial police examining the crime scene where Mrs. Linda was murdered on the first day of the Lunar New Year, 2017. However, when law enforcement forces arrived, they faced an immediate hurdle. The crime scene had been severely compromised. Due to the chaos and panic, grieving family members and neighbors had crowded into the house and critically had moved the victim's body from its original position. Despite the disturbed scene, the initial forensic examination revealed highly disturbing details. There were 19 distinct marks of trauma on the victim's body, including a large, deep bruise on her head. Crucially, investigators noted that one of the victim's earrings had been torn off, leaving a laceration on her earlobe. Scouring the floor for evidence, detectives located a gold earring lying a short distance from where the body was found. Furthermore, they discovered a suspicious brown stain, suspected to be dried blood, smeared on a sack of rice inside the house. To conclusively determine the cause of death, the police requested a forensic autopsy. However, they hit a wall of resistance. The victim's family, stricken with grief and cultural apprehension, initially refused to allow the procedure. It took significant time and persistent persuasion by the authorities to convince the family to consent to the autopsy, a step vital to finding justice for Mrs. Linda. The results from the Provincial Police's Criminal Techniques Division, combined with the forensic analysis from the Ministry of Public Security's Institute of Criminal Science, painted a grim picture. The mechanism of death was not electrocution, but mechanical asphyxiation caused by the compression of the airway. With this scientific confirmation, the police officially reclassified the incident. This was no accident, it was a homicide. Profiling the victim and establishing theories. During the preliminary investigation, detectives built a profile of the victim. Mrs. Linda was a solitary, gentle woman living in a house of gratitude, a home built for the poor by charity. She maintained good relations with her neighbors and was not known to have any conflicts or enemies. The investigation team posited two primary theories. An intruder broke in to commit burglary, was discovered by the victim, and silenced her to cover their tracks. The murder was the result of a personal vendetta or emotional conflict. However, the evidence posed a contradiction. The victim was classified as a verified impoverished resident with no valuable assets. Furthermore, the crime scene examination showed no signs of forced entry, prying, or ransacking. The victim's gold earring, though torn from her ear, was left on the floor, not stolen. Based on these factors, investigators systematically ruled out the motive of robbery or theft. The manhunt begins. Determined to crack the case and bring the killer out of the shadows, the provincial police mobilized a task force of nearly 100 officers, including elite detectives from the Criminal Investigation Department and local district units, to focus all resources on the investigation. The timing of the crime, the first day of the Lunar New Year, presented a unique psychological barrier. Detectives attempting to gather intelligence faced immense difficulty. In accordance with local superstitions and custom, residents were extremely reluctant to discuss death or legal troubles at the start of the year, fearing it would bring bad luck. Many witnesses gave cursory answers, while others appeared annoyed and uncooperative. Yet, through tenacious information gathering, surveillance, and the systematic elimination of hundreds of potential subjects from the suspect list, the investigative net finally tightened. The authorities ultimately identified the prime suspect behind the brutal killing of Mrs. Linda, David Young Von Tha, the neighbor living right next door. Drawing from a web of gathered intelligence, the investigative team systematically dismantled the initial theory that Mrs. Linda, born 1952, a resident of Han Lap Village, had been murdered during a robbery gone wrong. The logic for ruling out a property crime was grounded in the victim's profile. She was elderly, frail, and classified as an impoverished resident with no assets of significant value. Furthermore, the forensic sweep of the crime scene revealed no signs of forced entry, prying, or ransacking. Perhaps most telling was the fact that the victim's gold earring, though torn from her ear, had not been taken. With robbery off the table, the police pivoted their entire investigative force toward a more personal, sinister motive: a murder born of conflict. Through relentless information gathering and the methodical elimination of hundreds of potential persons of interest, investigators finally zeroed in on a prime suspect. The trail led them right next door to Mrs. Linda's immediate neighbor, David Zuong Von Ta, born 1981. The suspect's dark past. A background check on David revealed a history of violence. He held a prior criminal record for intentional injury. In a chilling incident from 2006 during an argument with his wife, David had strangled her until she lost consciousness. Seeing his wife lying motionless and believing he had killed her, he coldly informed people that she had fallen ill and died. Fortunately, alert neighbors intervened, rushing her to the emergency room just in time to save her life. The interrogation, alibis, and lies. With a suspect identified, the police summoned David to the station to answer for the suspicious circumstances surrounding his neighbor's death. Inside the interrogation room, David staunchly denied any involvement in the death of Mrs. Linda. He presented a series of alibis, attempting to account for his whereabouts during the critical time frame. However, eagle-eyed detectives noticed a small but significant detail: a fresh scratch on David's arm. When pressed about the origin of this injury, David claimed he had fallen off his motorcycle on the morning of the Lunar New Year. Seeking to verify this claim, investigators immediately deployed to the location where David alleged the accident took place. The alibi quickly began to crumble. Residents in the vicinity unanimously reported that they had neither seen nor heard of any motorcycle accident that morning. The smoking gun, DNA evidence. To secure irrefutable proof, the police obtained a blood sample from David and dispatched it to the Ministry of Public Security's Institute of Criminal Science for DNA analysis. The results provided the breakthrough the case needed. The biological matter recovered from under the fingernails of the victim, Mrs. Linda, was a direct match to David. The confession, a petty grudge turned deadly. Faced with the undeniable forensic results and the sharp, piercing questioning of the detectives, David's defenses collapsed. He finally confessed to his brutal crime. According to his confession, the motive stemmed from a trivial dispute. Sometime prior, while riding his motorcycle out of the alley, he encountered Mrs. Linda walking in the middle of the road. Despite honking his horn, she did not move out of the way, leading to a verbal altercation between the two. On the morning of January 28, 1917, the first day of the Lunar New Year, After consuming alcohol, the memory of that argument resurfaced in David's mind. Fueled by liquid courage and resentment, he walked over to Mrs. Linda's house, separated from his own by a single wall, with the specific intent to kill her. Finding Mrs. Linda home alone, David approached her. He strangled her with his bare hands and smashed her head against the ground until she ceased to breathe. The New Year murder. Final chapter. The killer revealed. Defendant David standing trial at the court of first instance. To cover his tracks, David orchestrated a scene to look like an accident. He took an electrical socket from within the house and wrapped the wire around the victim's hand, staging a tableau of fatal electrocution. After committing the murder, he calmly left the scene and proceeded to visit other neighbors to exchange New Year's greetings, meticulously crafting an alibi of a normal, festive holiday. At 4 p.m. that same day, Mrs. Linda's niece and her husband arrived to visit for the holiday. They found the house pitch black, with the door left slightly ajar. Calling out her name and receiving no answer, the niece pushed the door open and stepped inside, only to discover the horrifying sight of her aunt lying on the floor next to her bed, clutching an electrical wire. Believing Mrs. Linda was being electrocuted, the frantic relatives immediately cut the power at the breaker and attempted first aid while screaming for help. However, it was too late. The victim had been dead for hours. Initially, the grieving family believed Mrs. Linda had fallen victim to a tragic electrical accident. It was only later, when they noticed the strange injuries inconsistent with electrocution, that suspicion took root, leading them to alert the local authorities and ultimately unveil the truth.
Welcome to Vietnam True Crime. This is where we share real criminal cases that happened in Vietnam. Vietnam is known for its peace and safety, but like any society, it still has its darker side and stories worth reflecting on. Everything you hear here is based on the truth, nothing but the truth. For the sake of international viewers, the full names of both perpetrators and victims have been altered, but the essence of the story remains unchanged.
It started with a chilling silence. A guest, trapped behind a locked iron gate on the second floor, called out repeatedly for the landlady to let him out, but there was no answer. Desperate to leave, the guest was forced to climb down the back of the building to reach the front entrance. But when he stepped through the front door, frustration turned to horror. Inside, amidst a scene of chaos, he discovered the body of the landlady. She had been brutally murdered. The crime took place in the quiet commune of Minh Khai in the Tai Binh province exactly 15 years ago. The victim was a woman we will call Mrs. Gloria, born in 1962, the owner of the NokJoy motel. She was killed inside the very establishment she ran. According to the cold case files, on the evening of January 8, 2011, a man named Henry arrived with his girlfriend to rent a room for the night. Mrs. Gloria assigned them a room on the second floor. The motel had a specific security measure, an iron gate separating the first floor from the second. Every night, the landlady would lock this gate, only opening it the following morning. On the morning of January 9, 2011, Henry and his girlfriend woke up ready to leave. They called down to Mrs. Gloria to unlock the gate, but the house remained silent. With no other option, Henry climbed down from the rear of the building and circled back to the front entrance. To his surprise, the main door was unlocked. Henry pushed it open and stepped inside, only to be greeted by blood spatter. Pushing further into the gloom, he found the woman lying dead in room 116, just near the entrance. Local police, in coordination with provincial forensic units, immediately descended on the scene to conduct an autopsy and secure evidence. The victim was identified as Mrs. Gloria. Initial forensics revealed a violent end. She had been stabbed 9 times, with fatal wounds to the heart and abdomen. But the killer hadn't stopped there. A phone charging cable was found wrapped tightly around her neck. The crime scene told the story of a frantic search. The room had been ransacked. Strangely, the key was still inserted in the victim's safe, yet the safe remained unopened. However, a Honda Airblade scooter, a gold necklace, a gold ring, and a mobile phone were missing. Based on the autopsy, the time of death was estimated between 11 p.m. and midnight on January 8th. Combining the physical evidence with witness statements, investigators classified this as a homicide robbery. Detectives began scrubbing through the victims' connections. They cast a wide net, targeting individuals with records of theft, gambling, drug addiction, or those with unexplained gaps in their alibis. The first suspect to emerge was Liam, born in 1985, a former employee of the motel. Records showed that at 11 p.m. on the night of the murder, Liam had made the final call to the victim's phone. When brought in for questioning, Liam shocked investigators. He confessed. He claimed he had killed Mrs. Gloria to rob her, even describing the sequence of events. However, seasoned detectives noticed cracks in his story. His details contradicted the forensic evidence. Under intense interrogation and faced with undeniable logic, Liam's story fell apart. He finally admitted the twisted truth. He had fabricated the entire confession. He hadn't killed anyone. He simply wanted the notoriety. He wanted people to know his name. With Liam ruled out as a glory hound, the task force refocused. They turned their attention to the transient nature of a motel's clientele. By January 28, 2011, after weeks of gathering intelligence and piecing together the timeline, investigators zeroed in on their prime suspects, a couple who had checked into the NokJoy motel on that fatal night.
With the false lead of Liam cleared, investigators knew the real killer was still out there, buying time with every passing hour. The Tai Bing police force launched a cross-country manhunt that would stretch through the country's most significant holiday. By January 28, 2011, days before the Lunar New Year, detectives sifted through the remaining evidence and identified a new prime suspect. His name was Lucas, born in 1985. Lucas was a man with a complicated history. Originally a local, his family had moved south to the rugged Central Highlands province of Kon Tum to work the land, before Lucas eventually drifted back north. But he wasn't alone. Intelligence suggested he was on the run with his girlfriend, a woman we will call Ursula, born in 1990. At 1 a.m. on January 31st, just as families were preparing for the New Year festivities, the task force pinpointed the couple's location. They had fled back to the Central Highlands. A specialized team of 5 detectives immediately mobilized, sacrificing their holiday to pursue the suspects over 800 kilometers away. By New Year's Eve, February 2nd, the team traced Lucas's network to the Dak Ha district. A second tactical team was dispatched to reinforce the capture. When the second team arrived in the Central Highlands, it was already noon on the first day of the Lunar New Year. The atmosphere was festive, but the detectives were laser-focused. They located Lucas hiding in an acquaintance's house nestled in a valley. The terrain was difficult. Backed by dense jungle, a direct raid carried a high risk of the suspect escaping into the tree line. Police devised a psychological game. They had to lure Lucas out of the stronghold. The trap was sprung on February 4th, the second day of the new year. At 1 p.m., Lucas was ambushed and arrested. In his possession was a damning piece of evidence, Mrs. Gloria's stolen mobile phone. Shortly after, Ursula was also taken into custody. Under interrogation, the dark roadmap of the crime was revealed. Lucas and Ursula had met in their hometown and worked together in a coastal province. On the night of January 8th, they took a bus back to the town, checking into Gloria's motel with a sinister plan already formed. They were there to steal. They strategically rented room 117, located directly next to the landlady's room 116. Lucas admitted that while moving through the motel, he spotted a Thai fruit knife left on a sales counter. He pocketed it. At 11 p.m., seeing that Mrs. Gloria was alone in her room, Lucas made his move. He stormed the room, stabbing the landlady repeatedly. As Mrs. Gloria collapsed, struggling and crying for help, Lucas reached for a nearby phone charging cable. He wrapped it around her neck, strangling her until she went still. With the murder complete, the robbery began. Lucas ransacked the room. He attempted to crack the safe but failed. Instead, he grabbed jewelry and the victim's phone. The couple then stole Mrs. Gloria's motorbike and fled into the night. Upon reaching a ferry crossing at the Tra Ly River, panic set in. Fearing the motorbike would be easily identified, Lucas drove the vehicle into the river to destroy the evidence before vanishing with Ursula. The verdict: the law was absolute. For his brutal crimes, Lucas was sentenced to death for murder, with an additional 6 years for robbery. Ursula, for her role in aiding the killer and concealing the crime, was sentenced to 6 years in prison.
Thank you for spending your time with us on Vietnam True Crime. If you're interested in this series, please like, comment, and subscribe to stay updated with our latest episodes.
Anh chăm sóc vợ anh thế nào thì phải chăm sóc em như vậy. Chỉ vì một câu nói và tin báo mang thai, một bác sĩ khoa ngoại đáng kính đã biến phòng trực bệnh viện thành hiện trường của một vụ án phân xác kinh hoàng. 11 phần thi thể, thuốc ngủ liều cao và một kế hoạch tàn độc đến mức không ai dám tin đó là hành động của một lương y. Chào mừng quý vị đến với kênh của chúng tôi Vietnam Case File. Sáng ngày 18 tháng 3 năm 2025, Tòa án Nhân dân tỉnh Đồng Nai đã mở phiên tòa sơ thẩm xét xử Danh Sơn, nguyên bác sĩ Bệnh viện Đa khoa tỉnh Đồng Nai. Vụ án này không chỉ gây chấn động bởi danh phận của kẻ thù ác mà còn bởi thủ đoạn giết người phi tang vô cùng man rợ. Hãy cùng chúng tôi lật lại hồ sơ vụ án để thấy rõ bộ mặt thật đằng sau chiếc áo blue trắng. Câu chuyện bắt đầu vào cuối năm 2022 tại Bệnh viện Đa khoa tỉnh Đồng Nai. Chị BN, 35 tuổi, đưa người thân đi khám và gặp bác sĩ Danh Sơn. Dù cả hai đều đã có gia đình riêng, nhưng một mối tình vụng trộm vẫn nảy nở. Những cuộc hẹn hò lén lút tại nhà nghỉ trở thành thói quen, kéo dài đến giữa năm 2023. Bi kịch thực sự bắt đầu vào tháng 3 năm 2024 khi chị N thông báo mình mang thai 7 tuần. Câu nói của chị N, lời đề nghị chịu trách nhiệm của người tình và lời đe dọa sẽ công khai mọi chuyện với gia đình trở thành nỗi ám ảnh với anh Sơn. Ngày 13 tháng 4 năm 2024, Sơn hẹn chị N đến nơi làm việc của mình, Bệnh viện Đa khoa Đồng Nai, với lý do truyền nước cho khỏe. Nhưng thực chất, đó là cái bẫy chết người được giăng sẵn tại phòng trực số 645. Tại đây, cuộc thương lượng cuối cùng đổ vỡ. Chị N kiên quyết không bỏ thai và tiếp tục đe dọa công khai mối quan hệ. Chính lúc này, quyết tâm giết người của Sơn lên đến đỉnh điểm. Kinh hoàng thay, Sơn sử dụng chính kiến thức y học của mình để thực hiện tội ác. Hắn ngon ngọt dụ dỗ chị N truyền dịch. Lợi dụng lúc người tình đang mải mê bấm điện thoại, Sơn đã bơm liên tiếp 10 ống thuốc ngủ vào chai dịch truyền. Hắn bình thản chờ đợi 15 phút, lắng nghe tiếng ngáy của nạn nhân để chắc chắn chị N đã rơi vào giấc ngủ sâu. Và rồi, tại nơi được coi là chốn cứu người, Danh Sơn đã dùng dao tước đoạt mạng sống của người phụ nữ đang mang trong mình giọt máu của hắn. Không dừng lại ở đó, để che giấu tội ác, Sơn kéo nạn nhân vào nhà vệ sinh và thực hiện hành vi man rợ nhất, phân xác thành 11 phần. Sau khi phân xác và đem phi tang ở nhiều nơi tại thành phố Biên Hòa và huyện Vĩnh Cửu, Sơn quay lại hiện trường xóa sạch dấu vết. Nhưng hành động tiếp theo của hắn mới thực sự lột tả sự xuống cấp tận cùng của đạo đức, cướp tài sản. Sơn không chỉ giết người để bịt đầu mối, hắn còn lột sạch trang sức trên người nạn nhân, lắc nhẫn, dây chuyền vàng, bông tai vàng và lục lọi tư trang lấy đi 2,8 triệu đồng cùng điện thoại. Thậm chí hắn còn bình tĩnh mang vàng đi bán tại một tiệm kim hoàn để đổi lấy 3 chỉ vàng 4 con chín. Khi bị bắt khẩn cấp vào ngày 26 tháng 4 năm 2024, công an còn phát hiện tại nơi ở của Sơn một khẩu súng rulo và 5 viên đạn, hé lộ thêm về sự chuẩn bị và tàng trữ vũ khí nguy hiểm của bị cáo. Tại phiên tòa ngày 18 tháng 3 năm 2025, đối diện với án tử, Danh Sơn cố gắng biện minh rằng mình bị chị N uy hiếp, dọa sẽ phá nát gia đình hắn. Hắn khai rằng ban đầu chỉ định tiêm thuốc ngủ để mở điện thoại xóa tin nhắn đe dọa, nhưng khi thấy nạn nhân bất động, đồng tử giãn, hắn đã mất kiểm soát và quyết định phân xác. Tuy nhiên, lời biện minh ấy không thể che lấp được sự thật về một kế hoạch được tính toán quá tỉ mỉ. Từ việc dụ dỗ, chuẩn bị thuốc đến phương thức gây án và phi tang, đại diện viện kiểm sát khẳng định hành vi của Sơn là đặc biệt nghiêm trọng, tước đoạt mạng sống một cách man rợ và đê hèn. Kết thúc phiên tòa, hội đồng xét xử đã đưa ra phán quyết cuối cùng, loại bỏ vĩnh viễn Danh Sơn khỏi đời sống xã hội. Bản án tử hình về tội giết người, 4 năm tù về tội cướp tài sản, 2 năm tù về tội tàng trữ vận chuyển trái phép vũ khí quân dụng, tổng hợp hình phạt tử hình. Vụ án khép lại, nhưng nó để lại một bài học đắt giá và đau xót. Khi đạo đức nghề nghiệp và lương tri của con người bị dục vọng và nỗi sợ hãi che mờ, một thiên thần áo trắng cũng có thể biến thành kẻ sát nhân máu lạnh nhất.
Có những vụ án thực sự khiến chúng ta phải suy nghĩ, làm mờ đi ranh giới giữa người thầy thuốc cứu người và kẻ sát nhân. Đây là câu chuyện bắt đầu từ một mối quan hệ ngoài luồng và kết thúc bằng một bản án kinh hoàng. Chúng ta hãy cùng tìm hiểu các chi tiết đã biến một bác sĩ thành một kẻ thủ ác máu lạnh.
Đây không phải là một vụ án thông thường đâu. Câu chuyện mà chúng ta sắp phân tích đã đi đến một kết cục nghiêm khắc nhất trong hệ thống pháp luật Việt Nam, án tử hình. Một phán quyết chỉ dành cho những tội ác tày trời nhất. Bối cảnh là ngày 18 tháng 3 năm 2025, tại Tòa án Nhân dân tỉnh Đồng Nai, bị cáo Danh Sơn, một bác sĩ phẫu thuật 37 tuổi, đã đứng trước vành móng ngựa và nhận bản án cao nhất. Vậy, chúng ta hãy cùng nhau lật lại từng trang hồ sơ vụ án để xem điều gì đã đẩy một người thầy thuốc với lời thề cứu người đến một con đường tội lỗi không thể quay đầu như thế này.
Mọi chuyện bắt đầu cũng khá éo le. Vào cuối năm 2022, bác sĩ Danh Sơn đã gặp chị TTBN, 35 tuổi, khi chị đưa người thân đến Bệnh viện Đa khoa tỉnh Đồng Nai để điều trị. Và rồi, dù cả hai người đều đã có gia đình riêng, một mối tình vụng trộm vẫn nảy sinh. Kể từ giữa năm 2023, họ thường xuyên bí mật hẹn hò tại một nhà nghỉ. Và đây chính là khoảnh khắc mà mọi thứ thay đổi hoàn toàn. Tháng 3 năm 2024, một tin tức xuất hiện, biến mối quan hệ này thành mầm mống của tội ác. Chị N thông báo rằng mình đã có thai được 7 tuần và yêu cầu bác sĩ Sơn phải có trách nhiệm. Nhìn vào dòng thời gian này, chúng ta có thể thấy mức độ leo thang thật sự đáng báo động. Chỉ trong vòng hơn 1 năm thôi, từ một cuộc gặp gỡ bình thường tại bệnh viện, nó đã biến thành một mối tình vụng trộm và rồi kết thúc bằng một cuộc đối đầu chết người. Đây chính xác là yêu cầu của chị N. Đối với bác sĩ Sơn, đây không chỉ là một yêu cầu, nó giống như một lời tối hậu thư, một mối đe dọa trực tiếp đến gia đình và sự nghiệp mà ông ta đã gây dựng. Và có lẽ, chính lúc này, ý định giết người đã bắt đầu len lỏi trong đầu hắn. Sự tính toán lạnh lùng này được thể hiện rõ nhất qua chính lời thú nhận của Danh Sơn. Động cơ không thể nào rõ ràng hơn, giết người để bịt miệng, để chôn vùi bí mật của mình mãi mãi.
Thật không thể tin nổi, vào ngày 13 tháng 4 năm 2024, Danh Sơn đã biến chính nơi làm việc của mình, một nơi vốn để cứu người, thành hiện trường vụ án. Đây thực sự là một sự phản bội tột cùng đối với lời thề y đức.
Những bước đi này do chính Sơn khai nhận, cho thấy một kế hoạch vô cùng tàn độc và có phương pháp. Hắn dụ chị đến phòng trực, vờ quan tâm bằng cách đề nghị truyền dịch, nhưng thực chất đó là một cái bẫy chết người đã được giăng sẵn.
10 ống diazepam, chỉ riêng con số này thôi đã nói lên tất cả. Đây không phải là một liều thuốc an thần thông thường. Đây là một liều lượng được tính toán để giết người, cho thấy ý định tước đoạt mạng sống là vô cùng rõ ràng, chứ không phải chỉ để gây mê.
Và sự tàn bạo không dừng lại ở đó. Hành động phân xác thi thể thành 11 phần. Nó cho thấy một quyết tâm man rợ nhằm che giấu tội ác bằng mọi giá. Chưa hết đâu. Ngay sau khi gây án, với một sự bình tĩnh đến đáng sợ, Danh Sơn còn lột sạch tài sản trên người nạn nhân. Từ lắc tay, nhẫn vàng, dây chuyền, bông tai, cho đến cả điện thoại và tiền mặt. Và số vàng đó đã được hắn nhanh chóng mang đi bán để đổi lấy 3 chỉ vàng 9999. Hắn không chỉ giết người mà còn cướp tài sản, cho thấy sự đê hèn đến tận cùng.
Khi vụ án được đưa ra xét xử, câu chuyện lại có một hướng khác. Tại tòa, Danh Sơn đã cố gắng vẽ nên một bức tranh hoàn toàn khác về hành động của mình.
Và thế là, trước tòa, chúng ta có hai phiên bản hoàn toàn đối lập. Một bên là lời khai của bị cáo, cho rằng mình bị đe dọa, chỉ muốn gây mê nạn nhân để kiểm tra điện thoại, và rồi mọi thứ vượt ngoài tầm kiểm soát. Phía còn lại là viện kiểm soát. Họ khẳng định rằng đây là một hành vi man rợ, được tính toán từ trước, với động cơ vô cùng đê hèn, là che giấu.
Và cuối cùng, khi phải đối mặt với những bằng chứng không thể chối cãi, đây là những lời cuối cùng của Danh Sơn. Hắn nói rằng mình đã không còn kiểm soát được bản thân và đưa ra những lời xin lỗi, có lẽ là đã quá muộn màng.
Vậy thì, tòa án đã đưa ra phán quyết cuối cùng như thế nào? Chúng ta hãy cùng xem xét những lý do đanh thép đằng sau bản án nghiêm khắc nhất này. Lý lẽ của tòa rất rõ ràng và dứt khoát. Hội đồng xét xử đã nhận định rằng hành vi của bị cáo là không thể chấp nhận được, đã vượt qua mọi giới hạn của tính người. Họ cho rằng bị cáo không còn khả năng cải tạo và phải bị loại bỏ vĩnh viễn khỏi xã hội. Và đây là bản án cuối cùng, tổng hợp từ 3 tội danh: tử hình cho tội giết người, 4 năm tù cho tội cướp tài sản và 2 năm tù cho tội tàng trữ vũ khí trái phép quân dụng. Hình phạt tổng hợp cuối cùng là tử hình.
Vụ án Danh Sơn thực sự để lại nhiều ám ảnh. Nó không chỉ là câu chuyện về một tội ác kinh hoàng, mà còn là một sự phản bội sâu sắc đối với lời thề ý đức và niềm tin của cả xã hội. Và nó đặt ra một câu hỏi lớn, một câu hỏi thật đáng suy ngẫm.
On the morning of November 27th, 2025, the atmosphere inside the provincial court was suffocating. 5 judges looked down from the bench. Before them stood Brenda, 39, a woman whose mundane appearance belied a series of crimes so cold-blooded they sent shockwaves through the nation. Brenda was not a stranger to her victims. She was a wife, an aunt, and a sister. Yet she stood accused of turning her own home into a killing field, using a weapon as silent as it was deadly: cyanide. The tragedy began not with murder, but with financial desperation. In 2022, Brenda's husband, Thomas, fell into a spiral of online gambling debt. Overwhelmed and claiming she initially wanted to commit suicide, Brenda turned to Facebook. In a terrifying commentary on the lack of online regulation, she easily purchased 1 kilogram of cyanide for just 1 million VND, $40. The poison arrived in a white plastic bottle with a red cap. Instead of ending her own life, Brenda hid the bottle beneath the bathroom sink. It sat there, a dormant monster waiting for a trigger. As domestic conflicts arose, the poison ceased to be an exit strategy for Brenda and became a tool for problem solving. The prosecution laid out a timeline of 4 separate poisonings between January 2023 and June 2024, revealing a pattern of escalating cruelty. The husband, Thomas, January 2023. Knowing Thomas took daily medication for stomach pain and blood pressure, Brenda executed her first calculated betrayal. She emptied one of his capsules, refilled it with cyanide, and resealed it. Thomas took the pill, unaware that his wife had handed him his death sentence. He suffered for months, treated for mysterious symptoms including limb numbness and hypertension, before finally succumbing in October 2023. The 6-year-old niece, Daisy, January 2024. If the husband's murder could be twistedly rationalized by debt, the second murder revealed Brenda's true monstrosity. Following an argument with her younger sister, Brenda decided to exact revenge on the sister's child. During a solemn prayer gathering for her recently deceased father, Brenda dissolved cyanide into an Aquafina bottle and handed it to her 6-year-old niece, Daisy. The child collapsed in the bathroom. Feigning ignorance, Brenda alerted the family. Little Daisy died the next day. The 12-year-old nephew, Nathan, May 2024. Months later, a conflict with her sister-in-law, Nathan's mother, sealed the fate of another child. Seeing her 12-year-old nephew, Nathan, playing games on a hammock, she offered him a poisoned water bottle. When the boy complained, "Why is it so bitter, Auntie?" Brenda chilledly urged him to keep drinking. He died a day later. The survivor, Tyler, June 2024. Brenda's spree ended only because her final victim survived. Feuding again with her sister-in-law, Nathan's mother, she targeted her 18-year-old nephew, Tyler. Noticing his acne, she offered him liver detox pills, capsules she had manually filled with poison. Tyler collapsed but was rushed to the hospital in time. Doctors found a lethal concentration of cyanide in his stomach. He survived with 24% bodily injury, but his survival was the key that unlocked the dark secrets of the household. In court, Brenda confessed to all charges. She admitted that petty grievances, arguments over money, minor family slights drove her to the cabinet under the sink. The banality of her motives stood in stark contrast to the devastation she caused. The prosecution was unyielding. They argued that Brenda's actions were not impulsive, but methodical. She utilized her knowledge of her family's habits and health issues to weaponize their trust. She had killed 3 people and permanently scarred a 4th. Despite the defense attorney asking for leniency based on her confession, the weight of the crimes was too great. The verdict, the ultimate punishment, was delivered. For the crime of murder, Brenda was sentenced to death. For illegal storage and use of poison, she received an additional 15 years. The final judgment was a foregone conclusion: the death penalty. The case of Brenda is a harrowing study of disproportionate retribution. It exposes a psychological break where a human life became less valuable than the satisfaction of a petty grudge. Furthermore, it highlights a dangerous societal loophole: the accessibility of lethal chemicals. That a housewife could procure industrial-grade poison on social media as easily as buying groceries is a systemic failure that facilitated this tragedy. In the end, Brenda claimed she bought the poison to escape her own misery. Instead, she forced that misery upon her family, leaving an empty chair at the dinner table and a community shattered by betrayal.
Today, we're diving into a truly chilling case out of Dong Nai, Vietnam. It's a story about family, betrayal, and a woman who methodically used poison against her own relatives, leading to a conclusion that's as tragic as it is final. And we're actually going to start this story at its end, with this: the final, irreversible judgment handed down by the People's Court of Dong Nai Province. So the big question is, how on earth did it come to this? The woman at the center of all of this is Nguyen Thi Hong Bic, born in 1986. Let's trace the series of absolutely horrific events that brought her right here, to this moment, facing the ultimate penalty. To really understand what happened, we have to start with the poison itself. Because the story of how this deadly chemical was acquired, well, it reveals a motive that twisted from self-destruction into something far, far more sinister. You see, initially, Bic actually planned to take her own life. She was overwhelmed by her husband's gambling debts and bought the poison with the intent to commit suicide. But, and this is the crucial turn, as conflicts with her husband and other relatives started to fester, her plan warped into a cold, calculated plot for revenge.
What's just alarming is how accessible this weapon was. For the equivalent of about $40, Bic bought a kilogram of pure cyanide on Facebook. She just hid the plastic bottle in her bathroom, turning a normal family home into a place of extreme danger.
So with the poison hidden and her motive completely twisted, Bic began what you can only call a campaign of terror against her own family. Over the next year and a half, she would make 4 separate attempts to poison her relatives. And when you look at the timeline of her attacks, you see this chilling pattern. After the first attempt, there's a long gap, but then things escalate, and they escalate fast. 3 more attacks in just 6 months, each one targeting a different family member.
It all began with the person closest to her, the man who was the original source of her despair, her husband.
Her method was just so devious. Knowing her husband regularly took medication, she emptied one of his capsules, filled it with cyanide, and simply put it back. He took the pill, and by that afternoon, he was sick. After a 10-month-long battle with his deteriorating health, he died.
A full year passed, but now her anger was directed at her younger sister. And in a sickening act of revenge, she chose her sister's 6-year-old son as her target.
The setting makes this even more horrific. The whole family was gathered for a prayer reading. Bic saw her young nephew dissolve the cyanide in a bottle of water and just handed it to him to drink. He collapsed moments later and died in the hospital the next day. Just a few months later, another family conflict, this time with her sister-in-law, set Bic on the exact same deadly path. And once again, a child would pay the price for an adult's grudge. Using the exact same method, she found her 12-year-old nephew, NHN, alone in the house. She mixed cyanide into a water bottle and gave it to him. He too became violently ill and died in the hospital the very next day. And these were reportedly her nephew's last words. After taking a sip from the bottle Bic gave him, he looked at his aunt, his murderer, and asked this innocent, heartbreaking question. Her response? She urged him to drink more. The final attack came just 1 month later. This time, it was triggered by a financial dispute with that same sister-in-law. But this attempt would be different, and it would ultimately unravel her entire web of deceit. This time, Bic preyed on her 18-year-old nephew's insecurity about his acne. She bought medicine capsules, replaced the contents with cyanide, and told him it was a skin remedy. He took the 2 pills. But this time, the victim survived.
The survival of her fourth victim was the one mistake that brought everything crashing down. He was rushed to the hospital, and doctors immediately suspected something was deeply wrong, allowing the truth to finally surface.
And the proof was right there in the medical tests. 21 milligrams of cyanide per liter were found in his stomach fluid. This wasn't some illness, this was a poisoning, and the scientific evidence was irrefutable.
But survival came at a devastating cost. The poison left him with 24% permanent bodily harm. He lived, but that physical damage is a lifelong reminder of his own aunt's betrayal.
With concrete evidence and a confession in hand, the case moved to the courtroom. And this, of course, brings us full circle, right back to the verdict from the very beginning.
The prosecution filed charges under multiple articles of the Penal Code. I mean, the murder charge alone was stacked with what are called aggravating factors. Things like killing multiple people, killing a person under 16, and using cruel methods. All of which, of course, she did.
The court's judgment was severe and decisive. For the crime of murder, the sentence was death. For the illegal use of poison, 15 years in prison. The combined final sentence, death.
Now, throughout the investigation and the trial, Bick admitted to everything. She confessed to all 4 poisonings. And yet, despite accepting the facts of her horrific actions, she still stood before the court and asked for a lighter sentence.
So the court has delivered its justice, but the story leaves us with this deeply unsettling question. The facts are clear, but the motive? A series of family disputes escalating to the murder of children is almost impossible to comprehend. It forces us to ask, what truly pushes a person to commit the ultimate betrayal against their own family?
Thank you for spending your time with us on Vietnam True Crime. If you're interested in this series, please like, comment, and subscribe to stay updated with our latest episodes.